fiction, science fiction. We make no guarantees, however, how long it will remain fiction, fiction, fiction.
Illusionary salutations, Cognodocs. Welcome to Exofathom, show where we dare to think about way too much. I'm your host, Mike, and joined always with my two lovely co-hosts, Nick and Ayla. How y'all doing?
Happy Monday. I'm all right. How are you?
Dude, did you see that that thunderstorm that happened earlier?
Oh yeah, big
That's
time.
pretty rad. It sounded like the sky was tearing apart right above my house.
Yeah, it was pretty gnarly. It sounded like an explosion.
Yep. Ayla, how you doing?
Overthinking. So I'm in good condition for tonight's show where we think a lot. And yeah, it definitely sounded like the sky was being ripped open, and then somebody took a bunch of like crackly fireworks and chucked them in. Like that was the most crackly thunderstorm I'd ever heard. And lightning struck right across the street from where Nick parked while we were getting some Starbucks, which was epic. I've never been that close to a lightning strike, and it's like, yeah, I mean, it was already loud when the lightning was hitting like blocks away, maybe miles away, but like right there, whew, scary
Yeah.
stuff, man.
I was standing outside, and some of it was hitting like the trees that were next to my house. I'm like, I hope me holding my phone up in the air isn't gonna have me cause me to get struck by lightning. That'd be real awkward.
Oh, dude, no, it was so real. Like just going from the car to home, I was acutely aware that like I have metal in my knee, metal in my brace, metal on my crutches, and I was like, oh shit, I'm like a walking lightning rod.
And I know the chances, and it's definitely more likely I'd get struck by lightning than win the lottery or something good like that happening.
Do you remember that guy? I don't remember where this video came from, but it was this guy that was like walking down the street, and then he gets struck by lightning, falls down, gets back up, and then he gets struck by lightning again. And I don't know if he got struck like twice or 3 times in a row, but it was the most ridiculous footage I'd ever seen. And I was like, well, statistics are meaningless. Like, shit can still happen. Or probability. Yeah, probability stats.
It was still a pretty interesting day though. So cool. It's October, and as we get closer to Halloween, the veil thins. Our connection with the other worlds start to get thinner and thinner, and those interdimensional beings start to hop around and probably do cooler stuff than we're doing right now, right?
You would hope so.
Yeah, if you had the power to jump through dimensions, I mean, you'd hope you'd be doing some cool stuff.
You see a demon and you're like, oh no, and then you like wait and you're like, aren't you gonna do something scary? And he's like, no, I'm a depressed demon and I'm gonna think about stuff. And
I got some
I
into
don't have the
jury
energy.
duty.
I got some into jury duty.
Right. I don't have the energy to haunt you today.
What does jury duty look like in hell?
I mean, the whole thing is probably jury duty.
It's just one long jury duty.
Yeah.
With really boring cases.
It would have to be.
Dirty chairs. No snacks.
Well, as I try to hype myself up here, tonight's episode is going to be on this very topic called The Veil. What do you think about when I say The Veil? Or like if someone goes, The Veil thins, what is it? Just a divide between worlds? Is it a divide between heaven, earth, and hell? What comes to your mind?
Yeah, I mean, probably all of that, if I'm being honest. I think of also like the curtain in The Wizard of Oz. It's like the thing that stops you from seeing the behind the scenes. And I think that's kind of what I see, or I think of it as, where it's like the curtain that doesn't let you see backstage. And over certain periods of time, that curtain becomes more and more transparent instead of opaque. And maybe some people also just have a more transparent veil than others.
Is that a good thing though?
I mean, I wouldn't necessarily want it, to be honest. Like, yeah, it would be kind of maddening to be constantly, interacting with that other side.
Okay. I'm just thinking about like that transparent veil for a personality fit, where like your, I guess your ego would match your subconscious, right? Like your shadow, everything would be nice and integrate, or at least see through. I don't know if that's such a good thing to have, though.
Probably not. I mean, yeah, I don't think so. I mean, it would suck either way. I think
everybody needs their. There's a philosopher that talks about. Is it Aristotle? Some old Greek guy who basically says that it's kind of a good thing to kind of act like a politician, to hold your true philosophies in secret behind the veil, and only let certain people see past it. Those that work their way past it, right? That have gained that are initiated, I guess, into your inner circle of friends. Because if you just allow them to come in and see, behind your veil, then that leaves you open for all sorts of attacks.
Yeah. I think that's where the mystery schools kind of originated from. Not allowing the uninitiated to understand the rituals and secrets of these mystery schools. And I think a lot of it has to do with, too, is like the participation of other people in ritual. You really have to have participants that are also focused on the outcome of the ritual. And so more than likely, if you tried to recruit some casual into that type of activity, I think that their, psychic energy might throw the whole thing off.
The funny thing is, though, there are cases where the initiate doesn't know that they're being initiated, and it's actually a mechanism within the ritual itself.
Very true. Yeah, there are some cases where you need an unknowing participant. Yeah,
which is slightly terrifying in today's world.
Oh, yeah.
We'll see. Ayla, what do you think of when I say like the veil thins or anything like that?
Oh, I just had a moment where you said it was slightly terrifying in today's world. I was like, damn, you mean like so anybody could just be like, that person over there, we're gonna initiate them, and like they don't have any idea. Like, that's creepy.
Have you turned on the TV today? Have you seen any of the stuff going? We'll get into what's called liminary spaces and liminary experiences, where it's the threshold, it's the space in between, the world pre-ritual and the world post-ritual. So it's like that confusing, unknowing spot where the goalposts keep changing. You're sort of thrown all around to create cognitive dissonance and get you kind of more purified for the new world in a way.
Oh shit, I should probably watch the news. I make it a habit not to watch the news on Sunday, Monday, or Tuesday. I feel like those days are already bad enough, because Sunday you're dreading Monday, Monday's Monday, and Tuesday is an extension of Monday. I mean, not like they're terrible. I'm just saying in terms of...
What about
Well,
Wednesday?
for me, I just get a huge backlog of emails. Like, everybody since the pandemic works. Like, I got 46 emails between 6 p.m. and 1 a.m. Friday evening into Saturday morning. People be working Saturday. They be working Sunday. They get up at 4 a.m. Monday. And so, like, I'm not trying to work on the weekend. So, like, I get in and I have like 200 emails. And so it's like, yeah, I try to just limit the amount of stress I can have. But yeah, I'll let you know Wednesday if, looking back on today's news, this all
Actually,
resonates.
Don't. Just skip this week. Just skip this whole week.
It's not a good week.
It's not a good week.
Every
No,
time I hear
know.
the word liminal, I always think of that Simpsons bit where it's like the is it Simpsons or Family Guy? I forget. It's one or the other, but it's like somebody, I think it's like Homer's in like a army recruitment, office. They're like, we have the subliminal, then we have the liminal, and then we have the superliminal. And it's like the subliminal is like how they get people to join the army and like the in like movies and stuff.
Yeah.
And then the liminal is like more, just a straightforward question. And he's like, so what's the superliminal? And the guy just opens the window. He's like, join the army. He shouts it out the window.
Doesn't like they throw something at someone too at one point? It's just really aggressive.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, I was just gonna say, but about the veil, I actually like this topic of discussion because I haven't really dedicated a good amount of time to it, but it is something that like you hear a lot, the lifting of the veil. And I think like what Nick was saying, I too think it's some sort of sense that, there's all that we know is based on what we can observe or like deductive reasoning. And, mathematical theorems and, ways that you can deduce stuff from by saying like, okay, we have this data set. If we were to magnify it by this, we can infer this until proven otherwise. And so I think that the veil is something that we talk to in the sense that there's a lot of stuff that we feel or we intuit, but it's not something that you can quantify. It's not something tangible. And so it's beyond. It's this idea of some sort of truth beyond what we know as humans. And I think in a lot of ways that does border on the esoteric, religious and spiritual belief, consciousness, and all that good stuff.
Yeah, I would say you're pretty much hitting the nail on the head. There was a time, and maybe we've become so used to it that we don't consider it a way of lifting the veil, where I think it's like during Romanticism and sort of our scientific revolution period, where science was the way to lift the veil. If we see it as this form of like a mystery school type thing, and we try to discover nature's secrets, then it was through science that we can do this. But it's more recently has gone back, kind of drifted into that spiritual realm again.
Well, and even with science, I feel like part of that rolls into alchemy, right? Because like alchemy was one of those things where it's kind of like precursor to chemistry. And then you get as far as you can with chemistry and you're like, oh, okay, well, on this planet, this doesn't work. But you go to Jupiter and all of a sudden.
Well, there's also there's the emotional idea. So like there's a idea that alchemy wasn't supposed to make sense. It wasn't supposed to be materialistically true, but a way for you to transform your emotions and transform your mental states from one to another.
Yeah. And even in that case, it's quite interesting because there's a separation between your mental states and yourself, right? Like yourself is clouded by mental states. And there are other schools of thoughts that would, like argue the exact opposite.
You go for it.
Oh no, I was just gonna say real quick because you were talking about science. I think that science lifts the veil only to find another one in front of it. So it's just like a continual curtain right in front of you.
So we're dancing right now around the interpretation of the veil as a veil of Isis, the ancient Egyptian goddess. So she, during like Greco-Roman times, represented this whole notion of nature, right? Artemis also too holds this, but she had an inscription on this statue where she's sitting down and she has a veil, and I believe it is I am everything there was, and like no human shall ever lift my mantle. So when scientists kind of picked up this inscription and was using it as well to kind of push them further down, but what they found that is that every time they lifted a veil, They just found another one that was supposed to be like the philosophical kernel of science. The actual quote is, "I am all that has been, and is, and shall be, and no mortal shall ever lift my my mantle." This is also too plays into like some Christian notions. If you want to start to get into like some sort of Egyptian underpinnings to Christianity, because Isis is a very similar story to the Virgin Mary, right? And even outside of science, that lifting my mantle goes back to her being, or Isis being, virginal. But it's funny, like, yeah, there are some times when you do lift that veil and all you do is find another one, right? And
Yeah, I think that that's kind of the paradox of reality. I think that, I mean, and it's almost like as if reality works in tandem with discovery, where it's like, the more we discover, the more complex reality gets. And maybe that's just a byproduct of learning more. The more you learn about something, the more complex it becomes. So I guess in a sense where it's like the more we demystify all of the things that we thought of as mystical, the more mystery is left out there.
just, yeah, you start adding all these variables, because we don't have words when we've lifted some veils, right? Like the disillusioned, because the veil ends up being like this nice thing to hold the illusion. Before we were going to start to dovetail down this rabbit hole, I was going to even ask how deep do you want to go? We could end the conversation right here. You could wake up tomorrow and believe whatever you want.
Oh, you're asking me to take the blue pill? No, I'm good, thanks.
And then that's another aspect that we can look at this veil thing, right? Like outside of science, and kind of figure out the hard questions of reality, I guess. Like how do we get these raw materials and change them to do something useful for us, or how do we repeat things that we've observed? What, like how is it that we can get to a higher spiritual notion? And you kind of have always these twin heads of spirituality and science, really, or technology, that end up weaving themselves together.
Yeah, I have a question too, like, because I've thought about this a lot before, because I truly believe that there is interplay between humans and whatever is beyond, whether you want to call that God or the universe, whether you want to call it magic or mysticism or the veil. I struggle with the concept of, and maybe this is just like deep-rooted Catholic and Christian guilt that I have for some reason, even though my parents weren't religious. But like, I struggle with the thought of interfering too much, because to me, and this is kind of just the way I see it, it's a realm that has the ability to grace a human, but the moment you start trying to poke around is the moment you may find yourself in some bit of trouble. Like the concept that we've talked about, like a astral projection or something like that. It's like coming across something that you're not able to deal with. And
You
I think
mean
that
like the Ouija board?
yeah, that too. Yeah, we just talked about that last week. Yeah, I would say that that's a good illustration of it too. I guess it's like the concept is like, yes, it is. It could be potentially very fruitful for you to try to interact with this sort of veil or what's beyond the veil, but it almost seems like it works better as a one-way communication sometimes, where like if divinity wanted to contact a human, that's when I think humanity sort of reaches its fullest potential. But it's like when we try to be the ones to reach out is when we see hubris more often.
So this is where we start to get into, so like the death of mystery schools, right? Like before there was this whole thing where we would go somewhere, right? If we were deemed worthy enough, we'd go somewhere and they would teach us all about astral projection. We'd pierce the veil, we'd go through it and find the truth or whatever. But in today's society, that for the most part is gone unless you are like born into it or somebody finds you somewhere, or you end up in a CIA experiment, something like that.
Right.
So that what happens is you end up on this in this weird, going back to this liminal space where you don't know what's true and what isn't.
Mm.
You're the one who's initiating yourself into this.
I think
There's no
that's-
ceremony master.
Right. I think that that's a good point, actually, and an interesting one. In our modern times, we don't have, I mean, major religions aside, if you're not particularly of a personal or, a particular denomination. But yeah, I think in our modernity, we don't have ritual anymore. And not, at least not in that respect. We've kind of supplemented it with other things.
Well, interestingly enough, modernity is referred to as like a permanent liminarity. So you never really know what is and what isn't true, and it's a consequence of modernity. Right. And these whole societies, when they go through these sort of changes, these sudden changes that can happen, like in revolutionary times, in war times, look at our time right now, right? Massive pandemic. No one really knows which way is up, anything like that. We've entered into this liminal space.
Yeah.
But we have no one showing us where to go or what exactly to do. There's all this conflicting noise everywhere. It's actually a part of the initiation ritual to put in this noise.
Right.
So
there's no Virgil.
Yeah. So that a Virgil may arise, hopefully. People start to pick their Virgils and start to fragment. And that's when you integrate into this new world type idea. But when it comes to things like we're seeing that on the astral projection of the Ouija board, we experience that on a much smaller scale because it's just there is no ceremony master as a consequence of modernity. So it's up to us to play both sides.
Yeah. No, that is fair. I was just thinking when you're saying that too, like how simple the world was before the internet. I mean, that itself was like a accelerant to the liminal space. Yeah. And it's weird too, because you think about it like, okay, so if that was for thousands of years, humans practicing magic and ritualism, why would the humans interacting with the internet be any different?
I don't think they are. I think there's lots of ritual and magic that happens. It's just it's taken a different flavor.
Right. I totally agree. I think that that's absolutely true. I think that we've definitely, I'm sure everybody listening could think of an instance in which they, may have been, duped on the internet,
or even just like initiated to the internet.
Or initiated, yeah.
These are rituals that we're talking about. So like college is an initiation ritual. You're plucked from this, from your world, from your known world. You're isolated. You're kind of purged of your old personality, dumped in with all this new information. And so you're going through this liminal space where you don't know if you're going to pass or fail. You're parting the veil in a sense. And then once you get to the other side, once you graduate, you've come back and reintegrated into this world, but with a whole new understanding of how it works and a very simple piece of paper to remind you of this whole parting of the veil experience. Interestingly enough, in Canada, for engineers, there's a ritual that graduating students go through where they get like this iron ring. Because apparently there's like an engineer who like miscalculated, or a bunch of people miscalculated, and a whole bridge fell in like Quebec or something. Killed 75 people. So they created this.
Wait, is that the same bridge that had the Mothman appearances?
No, not in Canada.
Mothman
That's a good episode.
Stateside, right?
Mm-hmm. West Virginia.
Mothman stateside.
Yeah.
Sorry.
There's no Canadian Mothman.
No.
Sorry, that's just silly because it's such a like that was well-timed humor. I appreciate it. Those listening, that was very good. If you know who Mothman is, that was funny.
So they would get like an iron ring once they graduated to symbolize how important engineering is. So now they've returned to this world with all this new information and hopefully a new attitude and outlook on it.
Funny enough, a lot of those industries have Yeah, secret little rituals that they do. And my grandfather was in the Coast Guard, and I have a couple of his certificates for crossing the equator and the prime meridian. And they give you like a certificate, and they do like a little party, and yeah, and it's like the order of the golden dragon and some other thing, but it's very occulty, and yeah, I think it's interesting that we still kind of retain that stuff.
Yep, and it usually symbolizes like, because the biggest veil, of course, is life and death, right? You cross the veil, you move over to the world. We were hinting at that in the beginning, talking about heaven and hell and the different realities. One interpretation of it. These rituals usually show some sort of represent some sort of death, whether it be symbolic or a removal of the fear of actual death. So, your grandfather, he was your grandfather, right? So there was a him before he got the party and the little certificate, and then there's the him afterwards.
Right.
Once he's crossed that prime meridian of the equator, his old self is quote unquote dead, and now he's back and he has his little certificate and stuff. And he's a different person.
Yeah. I think that we should have little certificates every 7 years. Like, you're a new you.
Yeah, you got a bunch of new cells until you're 25, and they just keep reminding you you're dying every 7 years.
Yikes! That'll be the next smartwatch.
How
How many healthy cells do you have in your body?
It's just a countdown.
Yep, pretty much. Isn't that Justin Timberlake movie?
You mean Logan's Run? No, I'm just kidding.
Oh yeah, kind of like Logan's Run.
This is like time out, no time something.
It wasn't Time's Up, was it? That would be unfortunate.
Justin Timberlake movie?
Yeah, it was about like people basically living in like a dystopian world where everybody had a watch that had how much time they had left in their life, and the currency was basically like time, years on your life or years off of your life. And that's how people traded.
Yep.
Oh, In Time.
Oh, In Time. There you go. Yeah, very creative.
I don't want to even talk about that movie. But,
I'm streaming
so
on Netflix.
that sort of Western, I guess, look on the veil, right? Like the fear of running into the unknown and you're not quite prepared for it. That's actually a veil in itself, according to like Hindu kind of practices. Like, you can look at it, this notion of Maya. So Maya is like your consciousness, your ego, if you get into like Jungian depths of this idea. And it kind of clouds your world, and it's an illusion. And so there's an illusion of culture. So as you get older, you kind of get steeped into your culturalisms, and you may end up fetishizing some other cultures by looking at it through your culture's eyes, which I think where this fear comes in is when you run into something you can't quite explain through your culture. I think it might be a fetishization. But
Sorry, Ayla.
You lift up that veil.
What?
Just kidding.
Damn.
I see what you did there, sir.
Yep.
If you lift up that veil, then you get one step closer to this absolute reality. So if you see the culture for what it is, then you get a little bit closer.
Yeah, it's almost like the veil again. We talk about, like you just mentioned, there's the ultimate veil, which is like, what is the afterlife? But you could really think of a veil as anything that you don't know. And with each unit of knowledge, you're kind of lifting a mini veil in your life.
But it can be dangerous.
Oh yeah. Knowledge is dangerous.
There are some things that you may not want to know, right? Like there's some truths you would prefer to stay ignorant to.
Like Cypher, who just wants to eat a steak. I didn't blame him. Honestly,
you're okay with him, going back into it.
He shouldn't have killed everybody. That was stupid. But if he wanted to go back, he had every right to go back. Honestly. I mean, look, the world outside of the Matrix is awful. So,
but it's better. You know the truth.
Yeah,
I would much rather know the
You
truth.
get orgy dance parties. Come on now.
Ew. Everybody was so sweaty and nobody bathed.
They were sweaty. No, I know. It was the worst and most uncomfortable scene ever. Because suddenly you realize you're in a dark room with like a bunch of strangers just watching this unfold, and you're just
Yeah, and then like it's
like a
interlaced
grandma.
with Keanu Reeves and Carrie Fisher like having simulated sex, and nobody wants to see that.
Bad sex.
That was
Well,
bad.
yeah, that's the thing, is I'm okay with our movies and passionate scenes, but that just wasn't
But not from Keanu
good.
Reeves.
You don't like?
Not-
You don't want to see that? You don't want to
I don't want to see Keanu Reeves having sex. I'm sorry, no.
with a bunch of grandmas around you? That doesn't seem like a Saturday night.
Yeah, exactly.
The worst is when you look to your left and there's all these like, fanboys in trench coats, like ready for a Matrix. Because I went to all the openings of all the Matrix films. I was a big fan just for the philosophy behind it. But it was just really funny because you see all the different types of fans and like in lots of cases who drove those fans.
Yeah.
Like the grandma or the mom or the girlfriend or whatever. And it's just
There's something about uncomfortable sex scenes that bring people like materialize people. Like, I don't know what it is.
Does it break
It happened yesterday. I was watching Westworld, and there's this particular scene where there's this orgy in this town, and out of nowhere, Ayla just pops up and sits down, and it's like the moment when there's a whole bunch of naked people on the screen.
Listen, I have to do physical therapy exercises, and one of them has to be done in a chair. And you have the best chair, and it wasn't until.
But I've done that to you like a million times. Every time I walk into the room, you're watching something, they're having sex. And I'm like, what the fuck are you watching?
And then I would tell Nick, like, seriously, it's been so boring. And then you walked in, and boom, what
Are
is
you
happening?
sure you're just your culture isn't making you feel awkward? It's just sex. Bunch of
No, I just think it's hilarious that it's like you could be watching, like, in our instance, like she could be watching, TV for like 4 hours and I don't bother her. But the moment I come in, it's like a sex scene.
Wait, hold on. Do you guys just watch stuff with sex scenes? Because I feel like there's a probability issue here where there's just,
No, that's what he's
Is every
saying. It's
program-
probabilistic. It's improbable.
Right,
that
exactly.
We would each always walk in on the sex scene.
unless everything you watch has
Unless
a
we're just
sex scene
watching
in
porn
it.
the entire
like,
time, and you're like,
exactly.
Which
God,
we're
you just
not.
walked in on the sex scene. Come on. Guy was just fixing her sink. You could have walked in then.
do you guys, or do you change it to something with the sex scene whenever somebody walks in? Is that your thing?
Yeah. That's how you assert your
Apparent- yeah.
dominance.
That's how you insert yourself in that liminal space right there, baby.
Oh wow, look at that.
The
Bouncing
baby made
around.
it gross, huh? I made it kind of
Yeah.
icky. It was a little creepy when it came out. I was like, ah.
Nah, I mean, do you? I don't ask me questions.
No, I am not subliminally trying to get things started, but Nick is right. People do just
You're
manifest like,
superliminally.
yeah,
Super
well, even like
liminally.
when I was like a teen, right? And like, you watch like your Buffy the Vampire Slayer or whatever like WB show you were watching back then. I remember parentals would always walk in during a makeout scene or like when Angel's breaking up with Buffy again or vice versa. And it's just like, damn, like if you couldn't have just walked in 5 minutes sooner or 5 minutes later, but you have to come in on this awkward scene. It's weird.
I think it's just your luck.
Don't get me started on luck, man.
Is that another Val? Another Val you
That's
don't want to
another
talk about?
episode. No. That's just another episode. I think because we talked a little bit about superstition, but I want to do an episode purely on just luck. Because it's like how many events have to occur for you to say a person's luck is good or bad? And then it's like, well, how many events are you ignoring? Is it all perception? Is it something that just happens? Perhaps if we dive into the veil, we shall find out. But that will be a talk for another day.
And talk for another Val.
Mhm.
A talk for another veil. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What were we going on about? Something about cultural veils blocking. Oh yeah, you might run into something you don't quite know what to do with.
Mhm.
That can also be your ego. I mean, so lifting your ego is going through the ego death ritual, and you could do that in a bunch of different ways, right? You could do that through hallucinogens. You could do that through a ritualistic ego suicide in a way.
Yeah, I think that there's something to it with, you know, involving self-preservation for sure. But then again, like I'm not exactly the type of person that thinks that you shouldn't have a shred of self-preservation. I mean, I understand the concept of ego death. Trust me, um, I've partaken in many a ritual before, but like
Oh,
I
whatever do you mean, sir?
think I
Yeah,
care
do
not to
explain.
comment. I'm exercising my Fifth Amendment right.
I almost
The
thought you said, "I
last-
care not to comment on the exorcism," and I was like,
Oh,
"Oh,
yeah, that
Jesus,
too.
I didn't hear about what."
That, no, just,
Well, you did some heavy meditation, and
Mhm.
through this
We got it.
heavy, large amounts of meditation, you found a magical way for your ego to die.
Precisely. Yes, absolutely. But no, I actually have a kind of a real life, you know, illustration of what I mean. I don't want to get too deep into the details because it's still kind of ongoing, but I've been spending a lot of psychic energy focused on one thing right now. And I feel like that the more energy I pour into that situation, the more you're asked of, and the more you open yourself up to, I guess, possibilities of the antithesis of what you want happening. So case in point, last night, I got a visit from something I've never seen in my life before. And it was hanging out on the telephone pole. And I thought it was a possum. It was dark at night. It was nighttime. And I looked out and I was like, that's a really big rat or a possum. And I looked down the telephone wire and I got a little bit closer and it looked right at me. And it was a barn owl. And its ghost white face just stared right at me, and its eyes pitch black. And it looked at me for quite some time, and then it just kind of started pruning itself and hung out for like 5 or 6 minutes. And I have never in my life seen an owl in the wild. I don't think I've ever seen an owl at all. And so, yeah, that was one of those things for me where I was like, I feel like I'm interacting with that veil a little bit too much. And
Yeah,
now
bringing in
it's
some stuff.
bringing in some stuff. Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to say hi. All right?
Yeah, right. I mean, it was it was beautiful. It was such a beautiful creature. It was so quiet. It was very inquisitive. It kept looking, you know, like checking if I was going to move closer to it or something. So I just kind of watched it for like 5 minutes and then decided to fly away. But my neighbor has like a spotlight in their backyard, so it flew right through the light, and you can see it was just like totally white and silent. And it was really pretty, but it's also, you know, one of those things where it's like, well, we all know what owls symbolize, and you know, maybe I don't want to see an owl again anytime soon.
You see, I've had one run-in with an owl like that outside of my house, and it's just bizarre because I don't see him in LA. I've never
Right.
saw him ever. So I guess this was a few months ago. And for me, they've always been like symbols of Athena, though. So I've taken it in that regard of like a little bit of wisdom being imparted or running into that veil with the end symbol being wisdom.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah,
is
no,
also something that can be like once you tie yourself down to a certain symbol, you tie yourself down to a certain reality. Right? And that could be a deceitful reality. It's not the absolute reality that's actually going on.
Yeah, no, I was incredibly startled for the first second because it looked and I was like, oh, that's not a possum. What the fuck? And but then it settled in and it was just pruning itself. And I'm like, you're just a bird and you're beautiful. And so like I took the time to appreciate it. And you know, it was kind of an incredible moment because I don't think I'll ever see an owl again. I know they exist, but I never thought I would see one in my backyard, basically.
Were you worried that Molark was coming?
Yeah, I was worried. Yeah, I was worried. They tend to be, well, I mean, you know, somebody I live with believes that they're bad omens. So
Someone you live with.
The dog?
Yes, Indy.
Yeah, Indy's very superstitious. No,
Yeah.
well, it's just funny because I was thinking about this. And it's funny that you talk about that because, like, the idea of putting your intention on something and then, like, having stuff creep up that you're like, that's quite unusual. That's never happened to me before. Like, I don't know if this was Saturday or Sunday, but I was like, I need some outside time. Been cooped up in bed for months. I need to just try to get out. And again, this is just because of my leg injury that I'm dealing with. So I get outside, Nick sets me up, and it's a beautiful day. And I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden this song comes on, which is the song Nick played when I had my near-death experience. It's very unusual. It just keeps coming up, and it's like I do have it on one playlist, but this was like a totally separate playlist that I had selected, and that was very odd. But the thing about that song is whenever I hear it, it's like there's some sort of association in my brain now that like it catapults me right back into that moment. So I start thinking about it and I put my book down and I'm like, gosh, yeah, that was really crazy. And I was just thinking about all the like stuff that I saw when I like had this crossover moment and a lot of like peace comes over you and you start to feel like in tune with the universe, right? So kind of meditating like Nick said, I'm just thinking about stuff and listening to the song. And then all of a sudden I see a white butterfly. Then I see like a monarch butterfly. Then I see an orange butterfly, a yellow butterfly, and a white butterfly. And they all just start crisscrossing, not at the same time. It's just that like I had been sitting out there for a good 20, 30 minutes. I had like a smoothie and I was reading my book and it was an afternoon. This song comes on, I start meditating and like suddenly I'm just noticing all this life around me. And it's a really beautiful kind of like the craft moment, when they say that little prayer and then all the butterflies come out. And not to say that like I'm special and it was some magical moment, but it was magical. And I don't know what to make of it. And, but yeah. So that I don't know for what it's worth, but it's just kind of like it felt like a tapping in, and I was like, oh, I wonder.
Well, I think it's one of those things where it's like it's always around us. It's just like you have to be in a certain particular mindset to notice it, I guess, or you have to be snapped out of the trance, if you will.
Yeah.
Perhaps like the salutation's illusionary. What we're experiencing is a sort of stilted version of what reality actually is. And, in the moments of meditation or, deep, in my case, a lot of praying and a lot of, mental energy being poured into a really specific thing. I think that, it kind of puts you in a place. It puts you in a place to start to notice the things. And perhaps the things that would have been there anyways, but you just wouldn't have noticed.
Yeah. And the too is a form of meditation, though, right? Putting on any sort of amount of mental energy into it and picking up on a different subset of reality. Because I think if you try to bring in all of reality with no filter, it can be a little too much.
Right.
So your brain naturally picks out some parts of it in order to focus on. But then again, you're kind of picking your veil. You're picking your subset of things that you're noticing,
right,
and then applying meaning to it. Go for it, Dale.
Oh, I was just gonna say that's exactly what I was gonna say earlier. Was that like in my culture, owls are not an ideal thing to see, but if you had grown up in like Mongolia or if I was Japanese, owls are considered good omens. And I think too, the meaning of owls can change, depending on different things. But
I purposely. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say it made me wonder about the idea of the intrinsic nature of a thing, regardless of culture, regardless of background, and whether or not the thing is the thing and some are right and some are wrong, or as Mike was saying, if it is more to do with our focus, that we're born into certain things that empower certain things such that when we see them, we focus on that more. But then again, I've been wondering this for like, I think ever since you told me, Nick, is just kind of like, what is the purpose of an omen? Because if an omen is an omen, that's fatalism. You can't change anything. So what's the point of knowing ahead of time?
Yeah.
To just have anxiety until the thing happens? Like that doesn't seem in alignment
Sometimes
with...
you're allowed to, mentally prepare yourself, right? Sometimes it's easier to know the punch is coming, to take the punch in the face, than it would be to not know, right? Like you can soften the blow. You may not be able to stop the sting, but at least you can soften the blow.
Yeah, or maybe perhaps, knowledge is always there. It's just a matter of whether you can see it or not. Like, I definitely took a moment to pause when I saw the owl because I thought of Ayla automatically. And I'm like, oh, fuck, she's going to kill me. And
what the hell are you doing sitting around outside?
I know. Yeah. And I was like, okay, you know what? No. I'm going to sit here and I'm going to say, okay, why am I uneased by the presence of this owl? And so I kind of just sat with it and I kind of let myself feel uncomfortable about it. And then I did my best to reshift my thoughts about it and be like, look, this is a really beautiful bird. It's extremely rare to see an owl, especially in an urban setting. And, like it's something that, is kind of a once in a lifetime thing for most people. So I did try to reframe my concept of what was going on so that it didn't necessarily fuel that paranoia.
There's like almost like we're getting into like weird Kantian type stuff, right? The thing in itself and being able to see it for itself versus not itself. So like, in the objective reality, there's just an owl there, right? And then you start to apply meaning to that owl.
Yep.
But those are the series of veils that you're placing over the owl.
Yep.
But the objective reality is just simply
there was an owl.
There was an owl.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's goes back to our superstition conversations, a whole bunch of our conversations, really. But yeah, it is one of those things where I think you have the opportunity to allow it to be a sign if you want it to be, or to say, you know what, I'm okay. Like maybe I don't need a sign right now.
That's only achievable once you've gotten past the point of always attributing it as a sign. Like you have to get to the point where you see the objective world,
right?
And then you're able to choose if you want to be like, oh, that may be a sign. Maybe I should go do this thing, whatever it's pointing towards, whatever it means to you. Or you could just be like, oh, look, it's an owl. That's cool.
Yeah. Being able to free yourself from that type of thing is also really important.
What I will say is it is unusual for a partner to see an owl one day and then another partner to see lightning strike right in front of them, which is also a bad fucking omen for Navajo. So I don't know, man, when it's like back to back like that, I don't know what to make of it. And I think that's kind of where I went in that omen discussion, is that like, first of all, I'm only half Navajo. So I always feel like these taboos only half apply to me. That's just me. I feel like I can kind of just do that a little bit, but but also too, there's like an endless amount of Navajo taboos. There's some that I don't even know about. And so I do take that with a grain of salt. But I do wonder if it's like if you're supposed to, well, okay, so humans are meaning makers, right? Like a lot of psychology has to do with like if you're in therapy or something, a lot of it is trying to go through your narrative and try to get to a point where you can find meaning out of trauma and horrible things, and not that like everything has to have a lesson or like be tied up with a nice bow, but in the sense that like you're no longer stuck in that past, and you're no longer afraid of the future. You have the freedom to choose who you are at any moment and to move forward. And so with these omens, though, I just wonder if you continue to ignore omens, do they just start getting louder? And then again, it's like, are
To
we
what
that
end?
special? Well, yeah, exactly. Because I was gonna go to like, why am I so special that I'm getting accelerating omens? That seems like magical thinking. And
And if
so
the omen was
again,
any
my
good,
point,
it would be something that would deter you from the
clear.
fate, anyways.
Right, exactly. I mean, again, what is the point of knowing something horrible, like, and repeat, like, oh, something bad's gonna happen. Oh, here's a broken mirror. Here's this. Here's that. Like, at what point is it like Jennifer Love Hewitt, in I Know What You Did Last Summer, and her boobs are jumping up and down, and she's like, "Come on, man, I'm right here." What does she scream? She's like, that's like an
What are
iconic
you
scene of
waiting
her.
for?
What are you waiting for? Yeah, yeah. And I'm like, for you to put a bra on. No, I just it's just funny. I like
Maybe you should do an episode on omens.
I know, huh?
Yeah.
I definitely should. And I don't mean to derail the
So
veil, but I
there's
think it's like a messenger into the veil, I think, that we don't really understand a lot.
Well, I mean, the veil divides the known and unknown very abstractly, right? For everything, right? Look at it in Christianity sense; it divides the divine from the sinner, from the human, from the mortal. You look at it from a sense of beauty; it hides beauty. If beauty is divine, then it hides the ugly from the beautiful. There's always this separating thing. So omens might be that communicator, like or one form of the communicator that you can pick up on, right? Just another form of sign into this absolute reality. And I guess too, if you sit there for long enough and not focus on the omen itself, but maybe focus on things that you are not doing by your own standard, right? Things that are causing you to get further away from the absolute self that you want to be. You can take it as those omens are you're straying off your own path that you've set for yourself.
Maybe.
Because usually it's not like usually like bad things do happen to good people, but usually there's little steps that happen for that bad thing to go down, right? Whether that's intentional or not. And those omens, you can see them as signs as towards going towards those bad things, quote unquote. Like I'm going to go buy a pack of cigarettes. I said I wasn't going to smoke cigarettes. Done with cigarettes and awful, vile, nasty, disgusting things. I don't like them at all. And then one night I decided to go buy a pack of cigarettes. So I go down and there's a dog running up at a fence barking at me, or maybe the first gas station I go to is closed. And it's usually always open at 3 a.m. Why am I up at 3 a.m.? Because I want a cigarette. And so I can take that as the omen is up. I need to turn around and go home, or I could go half a mile further to the liquor store and get that pack of cigarettes. And if you don't take it as a sign, there's a lot of random things that can happen in LA at 3 a.m. walking a half a mile, right? So you can discern whether this is just a gas station that's closed, or you can discern it as it's a sign, and it would be me for straying further away from the self that wants to, and deep down wants to stop smoking cigarettes.
Yeah, I can understand that. I mean, like I would assume that it is definitely subjective, and it would have to be in line with what your desires are, like, and it's kind of confirmation bias, which is what it is. It's you're looking for a sign to affirm the thing that you need to be affirmed of in order to, fully implement or integrate that thing. Like I definitely understand that that's kind of what's going on. I don't know. I don't know if it's just merely like, okay, well, this is just, like you decide it, or whether it is some sort of communication. I don't know. The more I peel back the onion, the less I actually want to see the center of it. So I don't know.
Right.
Well, yeah, I'm
Well,
sure there isn't a center at all, but the less I want to continue peeling, maybe that's the
It's
thing.
like once you start to get to this absolute point of reality, for me, it was the notion that nothing matters. Nothing at all matters. Nothing that we do in this world matters at all. The very nihilistic point of view, right?
Mm.
When you have an option, right, you can start to attribute your own veil. This is kind of what also I think Schopenhauer and Nietzsche run into themselves when mulling over this veil of Maya, which is the Hindu thing. And they have their pessimism. They go, there's separate ways about it. Nietzsche first agrees with Schopenhauer and then starts to develop this idea of the Apollonian, the Dionysian. I went with my direction with it is being like the positive nihilist. If nothing matters and everything's on the table and everything's possible, impossibilities go away. There's no such thing as anything that's impossible. And I think that's at the core of what the veil is, because it doesn't matter if there's an afterlife. It doesn't matter if there's omens. It doesn't matter about anything. There's just this absolute reality, and things you can either push this reality in one way or another, but it has no meaning.
Infinite potential. It's like Schrodinger's reality. And it is whatever you want it to be until it's looked at.
It becomes a persistent, again, this liminal space, right, where you have this reintegration into the world, or then nothing has any sort of meaning to it except for it doesn't have meaning. It just happens. And then you start to find that that's the point of enlightenment in different philosophies and different religions. You just don't let these things bother you as much.
Yeah, detachment.
and I do think it's interesting if you look into the history of omens a little bit more, is that
Halo.
oh well, because I thought it was just okay. Never mind.
No, go
Go
for it.
ahead.
Well, I know it just seemed an extension of what Mike was saying is that you usually had somebody who was trained to interpret those. So, we're living, you started this out talking about the internet and how we have all this access to all this information, omens of around the world, different concepts of the veil from around the world. And so anybody can start to lift the veil, so to speak, and try to peer into it. Whereas in the past, that wasn't a thing. Not anybody could do it. You had to be like a trained professional diviner or specialist to be qualified to do that. I thought that was just interesting to.
Well, and I think that, I think that we do this to our peril, to be honest. I mean, yes, it's we've opened the source code of the veil, and now people can kind of dabble in it as they please. But I don't know if without a certain kind of structure, it's necessarily a net positive for humanity. I don't know. I mean, it could be me just being an elitist and saying that we need an aesthetic class to do that type of stuff. But, yeah.
Now we're actually starting to wander into our cult open.
Mm-hmm.
Or I'll probably save it till the end and leave it as like a thinking point. But this notion of this aesthetic class and whether or not it's necessary to explore the veil, because what you find at the core, I think, of reality is just chaos.
Mm-hmm.
And leaving it up to everybody to kind of build their own structure, building, trying to be able to jump through multiple worlds, multiple realities all at the same time, and carry that in your soul, in your head. Your metaphysical self becomes something that is dangerous if you're not persistent in pursuing it, right? Because when we started off, you were like, I want to take the red pill. I don't want to be blue pill. I want to know. But as you get further along in knowing, you end up knowing less and start to get a little bit more timid about what's the next monster around this corner, right? What's the next thing within this world where it's not quite, where nothing's really for sure.
I guess I would say wary, because I think for me, it's like the concept of limitations, like if if all of this stuff is true and it exists, there's a reason that we can't tap into it at the snap of a finger. And I think that that's probably good, because we are third density beings with, with maybe a spirit that transcends that. But ultimately that's why I'm saying, like, maybe an aesthetic class is better, because they spend their entire time exploring those parameters and then bringing the most useful stuff to the society. Whereas now that we've kind of decentralized metaphysics, I don't know if that's any good, to be honest. I mean, like, it could be like a Wild West of metaphysics, and that could yield something good, but it can also yield a lot of destruction.
It's a inherently destructive environment, destructive and constructive. Like you're building these metaphysical structures and substructures right in your shadow. Again, going back to this Jungian sort of depth psychology point of view, you're building all these structures on your own when before they were given to you. So your parents give you the structure. They give you, in a certain sense, part of your ego. Your ego is probably more built as you go to school and interact with your peers. But your parents, your faith, all of these things, they give you these structures so you can live off of. And there's nothing wrong with it. It ends up being pretty functional in society, right? But with the internet, now you can go, well, I have all these substructures. What's over here? What happened if I build my own? And you kind of, again, now get into like the Nietzschean Übermensch sense, which can be dangerous. History has proven that's dangerous with Hitler alone, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, you basically inducted the entire population into the aesthetic class with no training whatsoever, and no discipline.
Welcome to the club.
Mike, yeah.
Remember when I told you that initiates may not know what they're being initiated into?
Of course, yeah.
They don't always have to understand, or in some cases, it's necessary. And these mechanics of initiation can become quite complex. So in certain mystery schools, you can have multiple initiators. Like, think about, again, going back to university, all of your teachers are initiators in one way or another. They tell you whether you pass or fail and whether you can get to the graduation ceremony, right? So it can be a wide spread of individuals to bring you into this sort of beyond the veil, to peek through it and pull you all the way through in small, contained, manageable sense, like a graduation, or what we're doing here in the grand, larger sense, where it becomes very abstract in how you can choose to live your life, where there's there may be no rights or wrongs except for what your nature tells you. And that becomes I can tell you, it's a big gut feeling. It becomes very physical when you betray your nature. It's probably the most visceral feeling of disgust you have towards yourself. It becomes biological. It's very bizarre.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm sure it is, and I can understand the sentiment, because I've definitely felt, disappointing myself before. I wonder, though, like with this sort of open sourcing of the metaphysics and sort of decentralizing it, it's kind of, it would seem to me that we're breaking the objective cohesion of social reality. And maybe that's good, but I don't know, because technically, if everybody's a little, cognaut going out into the fifth dimension and, building their own hero's journey, that's all well and good, but I don't know, can we still have an overarching philosophy that will keep us together? Because it would seem that the only, like you said, like the substrate of all of this is chaos. But now that we have like so many subjective realities going on all the time that we're all interconnected with, it's like the chaos is breeding more chaos. And we would have to figure out what is the minimal amount of order that we're okay with cognonauts have. What is like the
the base. If our base is that there's chaos and chaos breeds more chaos, that is now you stated some semblance of order, even if the order is that there's chaos. That's fine. So
Yeah,
but
we need
if you-
like a code of ethics for Cognonauts.
yeah. The funny thing though is within these big societal shifts and civilization shifts, the rules of structure get thrown out the window in these like big liminal spaces for societies. All that stuff comes into question. All of that gets thrown out the window, and this is in times of very fast change, whether it be through revolution, a sudden world event. This naturally happens. So what we're doing right now is actually part of a bigger ritual that the whole world's going through, that we have a small little bit of control over.
Yeah. It is interesting. The structures of society do seem to be in question. At least all of the ones that would hold us together. So
That's what happens. So whenever you get initiated, like in these mystery schools, parting the veil of Isis, like say, or you even go with Dionysus, like those mystery schools, those Greco-Roman Egyptian schools that all seem to have similar rituals. It ends up being like the first step is isolation. So you pluck the initiate willingly or unwillingly out of their normal world, and you put them alone, so that they can start to purge their old self. And you then bring them into this liminal space, which is still not post-ritual, but no longer pre-ritual. They've been alone for a while. Maybe we've started to change their mind on a few things here and there. And then you just put them in a space where they don't know what is what. Nothing ever seems to make sense anymore.
Nice try. Your magic doesn't work on me.
I'm not working on you.
I know.
It's, do this one day, do the opposite the next day.
Yeah.
And you keep that going for a long time until they just don't know anymore. And then at the end, you bring them into the new world with a bunch of rules. The new set of doing things, new way of doing stuff. And that's how all initiation rituals work. And going back to these mystery schools of the parting of the veil, that's how it would work for anybody. And these were typically elites at the time.
Still up to the same old tricks.
Yeah, after all these years.
Yeah. How things have changed, not at all.
But the nice thing is that now, like, where before, because it was closed source, there was no way to inform people that this was going. It was, everybody was bound to secrecy, right? But with the open source of this veil, if you can investigate it, if you have a knack for investigation, so you're just curious, you want to go digging down deep, you can find this out yourself, or you can just say that it's happening, which is not the way that it used to be. So that internet might be a good thing, even if it is going along with these old ancient rituals of deconstructing society and deconstructing our bonds, things that were going to happen no matter what in times of global change.
Yeah, I think that it certainly has gotten away from them in that respect. I don't think that open and clear investigation and communication was on the agenda. But it happens, and I don't know if you can put the genie back in the bottle. So yeah, I mean that is the upside of it, right? And I think that kind of plays into the duality of nature as well. It's like if you're going to have a push in one direction, there's always going to be some sort of reaction in the other, and I think the universe has a way of balancing itself.
Yeah, that too, it just might be that thing on the other side of the veil pushing back, right? The return. Because like we can do hero's journey type stuff too, where it seems like all these initiation rituals are you're going to the underworld, you're doing a thing, and you're coming out of it. It's just the thing was always controlled by an aesthetic class.
Yeah.
And And it might be good for getting a certain structure or organization out, but it might not be good in general. Like it depends on notions of liberty, right? Like if you want everybody to be free, then everybody should be inducted. Then nobody's inducted. We're all on the same playing field then.
Mm.
But if you want that shaman class, or maybe I haven't considered if it's a fundamental thing, right? Because shamans are the only difference that they tend to go through the veil more often, or they tend to keep pushing.
Mm.
Yeah, whereas normal folk are happy at a certain point, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think that's that sort of paradox too. It's like, if we say we don't want the aesthetic class anymore and we start to chip away at these structures that sort of, like not sort of, definitely systematically oppressed a lot of people over the times. What's interesting to me is that the closer and more that we strive for this sort of concept of libertas and equality, it seems to be thrusting us into a deeper authoritarian sort of environment. And so I think that that's also just the interplay between positive and negative, that sort of yin yang sort of thing.
Yeah. It becomes like it becomes a weird macro thing that works also on the micro level, right? So the Apollonian is supposed to be the authoritarian over yourself. Whereas the Dionysian is sort of, you're returning back to absolute reality in a way, in a very chaotic way. Which, we've been talking about all night, that it seems like this thing, the further you go, the more chaotic it gets, but the closer to absolute reality you get. It becomes that paradox, a dangerous thing, in a yin yang type energy, which gets back to like the whole Jungian thing of once you start to dive into your consciousness, once you start to pierce it, and you go through the second you meet your anima, your animus, and you pull that out. It tends to be like, I think in Chinese it's called the Po, like the light soul, the feminine type energy, and at least for respect for the anima, but it becomes that sort of yin energy, right? Yang is masculine, yin is feminine.
Correct.
It becomes that sort of energy that you're working with, but you need both, and all humans need both, and we go through shifts. So right now on a big scale, we might be going through a deeper authoritarian thing, but eventually it's going to come back around to something a bit lighter.
Right. But it's interesting. We're going towards the authoritarianism through the vehicle of abundance of chaos, because that's the natural response to an abundance of chaos, right?
Yes.
Is to start to order and rigidize.
It's the natural reflex, right? If you have somebody that can like managing multiple realities, managing multiple truths or a series of truths, becomes very difficult to do, where it's very easy to say there's a single source of truth, that's all we're going to focus on, put all your energy into that one truth. Right? It's so much easier, and it gets your environment is no longer chaotic.
Yeah.
It's now far more rigid.
And then it stagnates and people become more chaotic to shake it off because it's become stagnant and old and decrepit. For personally, just dealing with people from a lot of different cultures, I guess, it has been helpful to keep multiple versions of truth up, especially in like faith systems where it's easier just to say, I don't know, but to listen to other people instead of instantly shutting them down. That ends up reducing the amount of chaos in the chaotic environment, because you can see through the veil through their eyes. You can kind of shift yourself over there and see the world through them, which just might be empathy, right? Empathy might be a nice little key to donning multiple veils. Yeah, it's a key to balance for sure. Being able to see the side of somebody else, and and the person you're interacting with is a veil into itself. You don't know somebody until you really know them. And it takes time to know somebody. It takes time, and it takes initiation and ritual. And
And I think social media has made that initiation a little bit harder. It has made the first few steps far
harder
more
and less desired.
Yeah,
I think a lot of people just don't care to do it anymore because it's not easy.
Do you think people have forgotten how to do it at this point?
I bet it wouldn't surprise me. It doesn't take very long.
To try to figure out the mask behind the mask.
Well, no, it just doesn't take it very long for people to give up on the concept of, like human interaction. It's very easy to once you hermetize somebody. I mean, you think about the institutional system, right? Like when somebody does a stint in jail, it's very difficult. The recidivism rate is very high because you've isolated them and you've taken them out of society. And so it's almost more painful to have to reintegrate than to just stay out entirely.
Yeah. Next, exile is a form of these weird initiation rituals that happen, which is sort of messed up.
Super messed up.
So like this is where like the borderline death of philosophy, where like philosophers should come into play, because like there's a lot of tools you can use within Stoicism, within Cynicism, that fight back against this giving in of your will into exile, of like becoming even in exile you can still kind of keep yourself without going through the veil and becoming whatever that ritual of going to prison makes you.
The hermit.
Yeah, you can keep yourself in a way.
Yeah, well, and I think that we need to start, and this comes back to the concept of balance too, is like we need to start integrating, holistically instead of sort of like creating schism. Like we're very good at creating a differentiation instead of looking at something like a whole piece, or, like looking at somebody as X, Y, or Z instead of, what they potentially could become or what they are deep inside. Like, I think it's easier to kind of categorize things very rigidly. Like we talked about, the concept of an excess of order. It's convenient, it's convenient to just tell somebody to go do something because you say so and not have to provide an explanation. Like that's just easier. It's much more difficult when you have to start to factor in humanity. And I just don't know. I don't know if humans scale, to be honest. I'm like thinking about it right now. Like I don't think civilization scales. I really don't.
It gets hard, right?
Yeah.
That's where authoritarianism seems useful, because you can get a whole civilization together and it becomes one person pretty much, right?
Right.
It was like a same thing with there were any sort of authoritarianism. Like so, like communism, all the houses look the same. It's just convenient. So all really bad houses, by the way.
Cost effective. Oh yeah, brutalism is so ugly.
Yeah. So if you're able to do that, then you can effectively manage a society. But if you choose democracy, if you choose to disagree, if you choose to argue with each other and complain, and not be like, oh, I'm just going to go off to my corner and sit over here because you're a big dumb face, then you could get a lot further, but it's a lot more chaotic, right?
Yes.
It's the trade-off. But this is like, I think the point we're at is this final veil of like ego. Like we're kind of muddling around this point where we're trying to say like, all right, people got different cultures. We even have it here in the States, right? It's always been our problem. Like people come from different places. We just need to accept them for who they are, no matter what, right? But you have this ego thing where it's like, I'm right, you're wrong. Doesn't matter the issue. So I'm not talking to you anymore.
Yeah.
And that's where it breaks down. But if you can get it past this weird veil point that we're at right now, I think there's a light at the end of this tunnel here.
Oh, I'm certain there is. I just think that we need to be more creative than we're being. That's all.
Yeah. And we just need to have a mass ego death, like a nationwide ego.
Oh man, I know. Well, and that's the thing. It's like how much, like we talked about with the Cognonauts, like how much, what kind of code of ethics should you have if you're, basically doing like your 3D printed version of the metaphysical realm. Perhaps there is a shred of, like there needs to be a base level of order so that the rest can be chaotic and filled with potential,
space for people to explore those metaphysical things, whatever works best for their nature by their own standard, right? My one rule is always don't harm another human. And that's very distilled, I want to say liberty-based philosophy, like just libertarianism, but not in any of that weird
the non-aggression
economic
principle.
sense.
Yeah.
Well, not even like in economic or anything like that. Just the basic idea of like you could do whatever you want as long as you don't harm somebody else. You can harm yourself even. Well, I'll take it that far.
Yeah.
To get that extreme. But in the very basis, in this chaotic place that we're working out of, don't harm another person.
Right.
It's
it's that concept of like my rights end where yours begin, your rights end where mine begin. We all kind of understand that pretty basically.
Yeah, and I mean physically harm. I mean you can you can yell at somebody if you want. Like I'm talking about like the physical harming of another human.
Mm-hmm.
But that's where I think the first basis is, and then you can. That's a sturdy enough foundation to go build whatever you want. It's just you always should come back and return to that point. And of course, you're going to build in certain ways that aren't good for you.
I think I'm going to make a shirt that says bring back the aesthetic class. It's just going to be my mission.
And then somehow you become the aesthetic class.
Of course.
You made this your mission.
Yeah. And then I become a tyrant and I wield my power with an iron fist.
No, you can become a benevolent tyrant. You'll be fine.
That's right. Benevolent tyrant. Where have I heard that one before?
But so this notion of this veil takes very many faces, but I think to put it in a generic case that can be used in everything, it's just separation between the known or the unknown, the absolute, and the unknown being the absolute and the known being some subset of ideas that you place on something, right? Or simply the known and unknown.
And the ordered and the unordered. No, I think it's really interesting, and there's so much that we don't know. And like I think we talked about earlier, is like I do believe that with every veil that's lifted, another one presents itself, which is kind of the concept of the Russian nesting doll, right? It's just a doll inside of a doll inside of a doll. It's turtles all the way down, and I think that that's kind of beautiful, to be honest, because it means that it's not about finding the answer; it's about the pursuit.
Yes, and even going again, like back to the statue, this veil of Isis. The mantle will never be taken off. You can never touch the face of divine beauty. It's just, you'll always find another veil there, right? Unless you touch nothingness. I mean, that's what I'm trying to do.
Oh man, and get that sunyata.
Yeah, right.
By the way, over the course of this episode, I think I've dropped about 9 podcasts titles. I've been doing it purposely. So just for the listeners out there, you want to listen back. I think I've mentioned 9 podcast titles of our podcast.
Nice. This is a good episode number to talk about this.
That's right. Yeah.
But no, let's see, outside of that, let's see, is there anything else? I think we've touched on everything. These initiation rituals, the various forms of the veil. So now that we've gotten here, are you kind of happy that we've gone over this? Are you kind of happy that you've been initiated, so to say?
Oh yeah, I mean, I love topics like this. I just don't necessarily like interacting with the spirit world. I do it sparingly because I think that it requires there's a cost to everything. And so if I'm not wholeheartedly willing to pay the cost, I don't necessarily dabble.
I've always been. I always try I think I dabble more now than I did before,
Mm.
and the cost is definitely there. It'll hit you real quick.
Yeah, very quick.
But I think it's the pursuit of fearlessness, I guess, by means like a decent amount of fearlessness or a decent amount of courage. Not too much, but not too little.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, self-actualization, autonomy, courage,
Yeah.
For sure. Did we lose Ayla?
No. I'm just everything. I want to just bring it back to omens, and so I've just been listening.
You're fixing
it.
No, but it's true though. I've just been really enjoying hearing the two of you go back and forth, and I think that, I think a lot of what you're talking about too is that the veil, it's really alluding to an absence of true knowing, and I think that we want to know, and that creates kind of a recipe for disaster, because anybody who seems to approximate that true knowing gets to this elevated status, even though we kind of all know that nobody can truly know.
Yeah.
We still want the person that knows the most at the given time, which is
Right.
constantly changing. And
Of course. Well, and that's where the
unknowable.
hubris, I think that's the hubris of the open source thing too. It's like, who are you to say that you know? I mean, like I believe that people can peek behind the veil all they want, but then it's like they want to bring their knowledge to other people as if they were a guru or some sort of authority in the matter, when it's like I wouldn't do that. Like I don't.
Capitalism right there. It's true though. I've been seeing a lot of like.
Wait, do we have super
guru
chats?
people. Huh?
If we have super chats, then we've become gurus.
Oh no, I know. I wish we had super chats. That'd be amazing.
I don't know what this is.
It's on YouTube. It's like people pay to comment. Although, I mean, like there's nobody commenting. But I don't think I would do super chats in like a regular stream. I would like people to just be able to comment.
Yeah, you don't want to do that. Not on this sort of stuff, because we run into that trap, right?
Right. Yeah, taking money for our sophistry is probably not a good call.
Well, the great thing is that once you stop wanting to know, you'll start to know.
Oh
Ain't
yeah,
that
yeah.
the freaking truth.
It's like sand in your hand, right? And the harder you squeeze, the more pours out of it.
And then, as long as like humanity goes, as long as you just keep pressing knowledge forward, or whatever it is, or just wonderment forward, you're in the right place, I think. Because then it's not all about you; it's just about getting the idea further down the
Wonderment.
rabbit hole.
Yeah, wonderment and just a dash of reverence. I think that's might be something that we're missing a little bit of. And it would do us a lot better in our exploration if we could practice just a scotch of reverence for the task at hand, for the implications of the task. I think a lot of people treat this stuff very flippantly.
Yeah, no, it should be handled with care.
Right. Absolutely.
Definitely.
But yeah, I accidentally muted myself for a bit. So any like I muted like the tab, so I heard nothing.
Oh,
So,
shoot.
like, yeah. But any questions?
No, it's great. I mean, fun concept to think about, the way that it's not just, one thing. It's kind of just like you said, it's the differentiation between the known and the unknown. And that really applies across everybody's lives, in many different ways.
The bizarre thing too, it's like how you construct the know ends up becoming crazy important, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like right now we're creating everything through science. Seems like when in the past everything was more faith-based. Like that's how we construct our knows.
Mhm.
But when you start to deconstruct it all, you get back to the same place. Just feels like a giant void that you can then build out of again and go back into and go back and forth ad nauseum.
Yeah, maybe that's why the Renaissance was such a peak era, right? Because it was kind of like the birth of science while being in parallel with a very strong religion. You know, you have people like Leonardo da Vinci. He was, considered a genius still today. He definitely was a scientist, but like there was also a deep religious sort of culture surrounding him, and perhaps sometimes you need that deep rigid culture to spark the rebellion of others, and through that rebellion we find ways to grow.
Yep. Definitely true. It's just that science and spirituality oddly working together in a weird way.
You mean to tell me the Christian Scientists have had it right this whole time?
Who are they?
I think they're the ones that don't believe in dinosaurs, right?
Give me $300 and I'll tell you.
Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah, no, I think good. So we're both happy that we learned this. Ayla, I don't think I got your answer.
She's not even here anymore. She left.
She left.
She just muted herself. Of course.
I keep muting.
Ayla, unmute your mic. Oh, I guess she's not going to unmute. That's fine.
She's scared. The veil has terrified her.
That's right.
Well, cool, man. Yeah, no. I guess I'm done with this. I think this is all I got.
Hell yeah. Well, that was a fun talk. It was interesting and quite compelling. So thanks, man. That was cool.
Okay. I don't know if there's a lag, but I definitely can see subtitles on the live show. And yes, my audio is dead.
No.
Okay. Well, we can hear you now. Nope. Now she's just muted again. Okay, we're done.
This is
can we hear me? Can we hear you?
This is what we call the omen.
Yeah,
an omen.
Yeah, it's an omen to stop the show. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks, man. This was a wonderful conversation.
Maybe the lag isn't that bad, but yes,
No,
I do see that you're done.
It's bad. It's obviously bad.
Back to the omens. Yes.
Okay. Oh, you're here now.
Did you?
God,
Let's count.
Are you serious?
1, 2, a 3, a 4, 5. Oh.
Yeah, at least 5 seconds of a lag. Okay, well, she's in the far end of the room with the bad internet, so that's not really her fault. But yeah, thank you so much, you guys, for listening. We really appreciate you. Please consider giving us a comment. Tell us what you think about The Veil. Have you ever peeked behind the curtain? Let us know what you think, and please consider giving us a thumbs up and a subscription to our YouTube page. We're really trying to grow that audience, and we just very much appreciate you guys. We're going to be coming up on our 100th episode soon, so that's going to be a lot of fun. Stay tuned for that. Thanks to Mike for bringing this conversation to the table, and thanks to Ayla for her contributions as well. I know that she's trying to listen in, but her microphone's not working right now. So thanks to Ayla, absolutely. And again, thank you guys. We appreciate you. And until next time, Cognonauts, you stay out there, and we'll catch you on the next Exofathom. Good night.
Peace.
Ayla would say later.